We're glad you're watching WION World is One. My name is Eric Njoka. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is currently answering questions over the controversial Booth Party in the House of Commons.
Unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules. And though I cannot anticipate the conclusions of the current inquiry, I have learned enough to know that there were things we simply did not get right. And I must take responsibility. Number 10 is a big department with the garden as an extension of the office, which has been in constant use because of the role of fresh air in stopping the virus. And when I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May 2020 to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working, I believed implicitly that this was a work event. But Mr. Speaker, with hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them. And I should have recognised that even if it could be said technically to fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way, people who suffered terribly, people who were forbidden from meeting loved ones at all, inside or outside. And to them and to this House I offer my heartfelt apologies. And all I ask is that Sue Gray be allowed to complete her inquiry into that day and several others so that the full facts can be established. And I will of course come back to this House and make a statement. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Carol Ridgway faces 8 weeks of stress and worry as she waits for an urgent appointment at the local breast clinic in North Wales. Yet, despite the pandemic, 85% of patients in England wait only 2 weeks for their urgent suspected cancer referrals. What can my right honourable friend do to ensure equality of healthcare across Britain?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm sorry about the case that he raises. Of course, health is a devolved matter, but I thank our NHS colleagues across the whole of the UK, and I point out that the Welsh Government will benefit from an additional £3.8 billion of funding this year, plus a further £270 million to support the response to COVID, Mr. Speaker.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join with the comments about Jack Dromey? We will, I think, be doing tributes in due course in relation to Jack. Well, there we have it. After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public. He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
Mr. Speaker, it is...
Hancock went.
I think somebody will be going for an early cup of tea as well. Can I just say, the question's been asked. I want to know the answer. Your constituents want to know the answer. I don't need any extra help either. So please, Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the point that he's making about the event that I attended. I want to repeat that I thought it was a work event, and Mr. Speaker, I regret I regret very much that we did not do things differently that evening, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, and I take responsibility and I apologise, Mr. Speaker. But as for his political point, I don't think that he should preempt the outcome of the inquiry, and he will have a further opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I hope, to question me as soon as possible.
Keir Starmer.
Well, that apology was pretty worthless, wasn't it? Let me tell him why this matters. Yesterday, in this chamber, honourable members told heart-wrenching stories about the sacrifices people across the country were making. This House and the whole country were moved by the honourable member for Strangford as he talked about his mother-in-law dying alone. He was following the rules, whilst the Prime Minister was partying in Downing Street. Is the Prime Minister really so contemptuous of the British public that he thinks he could just ride this out?
Mr. Speaker, I heard the testimony of the honourable member opposite, and I echo his sentiments. It was deeply moving. Nobody who heard that could fail to have been moved. And I know that people up and down the country made huge sacrifices throughout this pandemic, Mr. Speaker, and I understand the anger, the rage that they feel at the thought that that people in Downing Street were not following those rules. I regret the way the event I have described was handled. I bitterly regret it and wish that we could have done things differently. And I have and will continue to apologise for what we did. But, Mr. Speaker, he must wait for the inquiry, which will report as soon as possible.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister's former Health Secretary broke the rules, he resigned. And the Prime Minister said he was right to do so. When the Prime Minister's spokesperson laughed about the rules being broken, she resigned. And the Prime Minister accepted that resignation. Why does the Prime Minister still think that the rules don't apply to him?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not what I've said, and I understand the point that he makes. As I've said, Mr. Speaker, I regret the way things happened on the evening in question, and I apologise. But if I may say to him, I do think it would be better if he waited until the full conclusion of the inquiry, until the full facts are brought before this House, Mr. Speaker, and he will then have an opportunity to put his points again.
This just isn't working, Prime Minister. No. Everyone could see what happened. Exactly. It started with reports of boozy parties in Downing Street during lockdown. The Prime Minister pretended that he had been assured there were no parties. How that fits with his defence out, I do not know. Exactly. Then the video landed, blowing the Prime Minister's first defence out of the water. So then he pretended he was sickened and furious about the parties. Now it turns out he was at the parties all along. Can't the Prime Minister see why the British public think he's lying through his teeth?
Prime Minister, it was what the public think, not what a member is saying. Order. And I certainly don't need any help from round here. If somebody wants to help me, they can help somewhere else. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's up to the right honourable gentleman to choose how he conducts himself in this place. He's wrong. He's wrong. I say to him that he is wrong. He is wrong in what he said he said what he is wrong what he said is wrong in several key respects. But, Mr. Speaker, that does not detract from the basic point that I want to make today, which is that I accept that we should have done things differently on that evening. As I've said to the House, I believe that the events in question were within the guidance and were within the rules, and that was certainly the assumption on which I operated. But can I say to him, Mr. Speaker, that he should wait before he jumps to conclusions, Mr. Speaker. And a lawyer should respect the inquiry. I I hope that he will wait until the facts are established and brought to this House.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, so we've got the Prime Minister attending Downing Street parties, a clear breach of the rules. We've got the Prime Minister putting forward a series of ridiculous denials which he knows are untrue. Yes. A clear breach of the ministerial code. That code says ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. The party's over, Prime Minister. The only question is, will the British public kick him out, will his party kick him out, or will he do the decent thing and resign?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to repeat that I think that the right honourable gentleman, I know that it is his objective and he's paid to try to remove me from office, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that and I accept that. But may I humbly suggest to him that he should wait until the inquiry has concluded. He should study it for himself, and I will certainly respond as appropriate, and I hope that he does. But in the meantime, yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly wish that things had happened differently on the evening of May the 20th, Mr. Speaker, and I apologise for all the misjudgments that have been made, for which I take, Mr. Speaker, full responsibility.
Keir Starmer.
The Prime Minister's a man without shame. The public want answers to their questions. Hannah Brady's father, Sean, was just 55 when he lost his life to COVID. He was a fit and healthy key worker. I spoke to Hannah last night, Prime Minister. Her father died just days before the drinks trolley was being wheeled through Downing Street. And last year, Hannah met the Prime Minister in the Downing Street garden. She looked at the Prime Minister in the eye and told him of her loss. The Prime Minister told Hannah he'd done everything he could to protect her dad. Looking back, what Hannah told me last night was this. She realises that the Prime Minister had parted in that same garden the very day her dad's death certificate was signed. What Hannah wants to know is this. Does the Prime Minister understand why it makes her feel sick to think about the way that he's behaved?
Mr. Speaker, I sympathise deeply with Hannah, with people who have suffered up and down this country during the pandemic, and I repeat that I wish things had been done differently on that evening, Mr. Speaker, and I repeat my apology for all the misjudgments that may have been made, that were made on my watch in Number 10 and across government. But I want to reassure the people of this country, including Hannah and her family, that, Mr. Speaker, we have been working to do everything we can to protect her and her family, and it is thanks to the efforts of this government that we have the most tested population in Europe, with 1.25 million tests being conducted every day. We've been working to ensure that this population, our country, has the most antivirals of any country in Europe. And, Mr. Speaker, it's because of the efforts of the government, of officials, of staff up and down Whitehall, that we've driven the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, one of the fastest in the world. And that is the reason, Mr. Speaker, that we now have one of the most open economies, if not the most open economy in Europe, and one of the fastest growing economies, Mr. Speaker, in the G7. And, Mr. Speaker, whatever the mistakes that have been made on my watch, for which I apologise and which I fully acknowledge, that is the work, Mr. Speaker, that has been going on in Number 10 Downing Street.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education is one of the biggest factors when it comes to levelling up. It's what ensures that people right across the country have access to the same opportunities, and it's a key part of my mission to transform lives in Burnley and Padiham. With that in mind, would the Prime Minister work with me to ensure that Burnley becomes the best place to study, whether you're in primary and secondary school, looking for an apprenticeship in advanced engineering, or undertaking a degree in cyber security?
Yes, Yes, I thank my honourable friend, and we're investing in education up and down the country, and I'm delighted that Burnley College was part of a successful proposal to become an institute of technology, and that Burnley is home to the growing University of Central Lancashire campus, making it a fantastic place to study in Lancashire.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I add my remarks in terms of Jack Dromey, someone who was a festy fighter for workers' rights and an inspiration to so many of us across this House for the way that he conducted himself. We will miss him, and condolences to Harriet and to the rest of the family. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister stands before us accused of betraying the nation's trust, of treating the public with contempt.
Well, that is Prime Minister Boris Johnson answering questions in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister has continued to deny being at the gathering, saying it was a work event. He says he awaits the full details of the inquiry to comment on the matter. The opposition still asking for the resignation of the Prime Minister, who eventually says it never happened, although he continues to apologise.